Hey everyone, it's Curtis here from DataCrunch. Today we're going to talk about how to reduce your reporting time, at least by half and likely more. So this is a process that we followed with a lot of clients. I've been doing this for about 10 years and I've done this over and over and over again. And in almost every company that we've worked with, there are a lot of inefficiencies in how reporting is generated, how data is handled. And so if you look at your reporting through the lens of these few steps that we're going to be talking about, you can find ways to reduce that time, to automate some things and make it way easier on you. So, we're talking to people who, a lot of people struggle with lots of stuff in spreadsheets, lots of data is floating around in different files on different people's computers, or maybe you're an analyst trying to do analysis for your company and you have to do it all in Excel and you have to pull data from various sources and manipulate it, put it into certain formats and then analyze it, and that gets tedious week after week. Maybe you're a CEO or a leader of a company and you just need more insight from your data and from your reporting and it's not fast enough for you to make decisions. So in any of these cases, the things we're going to be talking about here can help you. And so hopefully this is valuable to you guys. So, and just to say again, you're not alone here. This is something that a lot of people struggle with. Fortune 1000 companies struggle with this. Small companies struggle with this. A lot of times, if you're smaller and growing, there's a certain point where you hit where lots of things start to be in spreadsheets and really messy all over the place. And so you really need to transition to something a little bit better. So in all of those cases, these things can help you. So, and I'm referencing an article on our site here as we're talking about this. This is Brad from Genesis Healthcare, one of our clients, and they were able to reduce their reporting by half. So you can reference the article and listen to that if you like. But we want to talk about the 7 steps here today. So first of all, I want to show you guys what a manual data process might look like. And this is actually a simplified version, but I'm going to open this up here so we can have a look at it a little bit closer. The first step is to map out what your process even looks like. So to illustrate that, this is an example process. So in any process, you have several steps, right? You have data collection steps, you have data movement steps, you have data cleaning steps, data processing steps, data analysis steps, data visualization steps, and finally your presentation, which is where hopefully people take the information and make some sort of decision based on it. So this could look like this, right? You have files coming from 3 different sources in this case, maybe a customer list from your CRM, maybe customer transactions from your ERP, maybe some web activity from Google Analytics or some other web tracking tool that you're using. So you may have to download files from each of those sources and then convert those, if they're in CSVs, convert those over to Excel. If they're in JSON, then that's a little bit trickier. And but maybe they're in CSVs, you convert them to Excel. It takes a little bit of time. And then you have to take those through some processes to get it ready for analysis, right? So maybe for this one from the CRM, you're in Excel, you're doing some VLOOKUPs, you're trying to standardize the company names, right? Because maybe a company name in one system has Inc. after it, and maybe it has Corp after it in another one, and maybe there's a space in one and not a space in another. So to be able to match up those names, you have to standardize them. And you usually would use some sort of standardized key that you have in a different data source, or in this case, a different Excel sheet that you're manually keeping up to date. And so you have to do a VLOOKUP there in Excel and try to match all those up. If there's new values, then you need to update your manual key. So that would be a step you would do up here, and that kind of cycles through as you're doing this week by week or month by month or whatever it might be. This file down here, maybe you need to filter out some transactions that aren't relevant. So you download it and you say, well, transactions from in this dollar range or maybe by these types of companies aren't relevant to this analysis. So you have to filter those out in Excel manually. Maybe you want to filter out negative values because your data is a little bit dirty and because of some accounting or because of the way the data is collected, there's some negative values there. So you want to remove those rows. And then, you need to look up the company names in this file, just like you did in the last file. so that they eventually match up to each other. Okay, and then you may have some steps down here that look similar to that. Again, filtering, cleaning data, and all of this is manual. You're doing this all in Excel, so if you make a mistake or something, it's not auditable, right? You don't know if at the end of this analysis you made some sort of mistake, you're not sure where that happened. So that's another problem with manual processes. So you get through this whole cleaning step, and then you're processing, right? So now that you have the standardized names, maybe you're rolling all of those up and aggregating some of the metrics. Maybe you're doing some calculated fields and binning values, like these are high yield customers, middle yield customers, and low yield customers, and there's some logic in there that you use to do that. And maybe down here you need to create a pivot table so that then you can again aggregate some of your values. And then once you do that, you have to create a master list of all of the company names and all of those files and put that in another file right here and deduplicate that. And then you bring the metrics from all of these 3 files into that file. And without getting too much into the weeds here, all of this takes time, all of it's manual, all of it's error prone. Finally, you're able to append that to another data source you have so that you have historical snapshots. So if you're doing this every week, maybe you have an Excel file that has, every time you've done this, it has a snapshot with the date, so you have to append it to that file. And then maybe you have another file that has some graphs and things that are running off of this kind of data. That's just for the snapshot, so then you put that data into a different file and make sure that's all up to date. Okay, and then you have to look at your data visualizations and make sure that they're running properly and make sure there were no errors, and add some visualizations if you think you need some new insight into the data, and doing that in Excel, again, is very manual and difficult. And then once you've done all of that, then usually you take those charts and some of those tables and you paste it into an Excel presentation and write up some insights. And then finally, you're able to present it. So again, if you're an analyst doing this week after week, this gets really tedious and it's error prone. If you're a CEO or a business leader and you're trying to get these reports, this process takes time and it's not as trustworthy as it should be, so that causes problems all the way down the chain. So, and oftentimes these processes are much more complicated than this. This is a very simplistic example, just to give you a flavor for how complicated data can get really quickly. So if we can take that, okay, and we can turn it into a manual process, an automated process that looks something like this, okay, instead of taking 7 hours, which is what we calculated for this one up here, maybe it takes 30 minutes, right? There's still a couple human touch points here. But other than that, it goes by smoothly, right? The 3 data sources here are all piped in. All the filtering and all of the unioning and all of the logic that you were doing in your spreadsheets is all programmed in, either in code or in some tool like Tableau Prep. All gets done automatically. Okay, if there are any company names that you need to add to your lookup list, then a user would get an alert for that, right? So that's an automatic alert. Then the user just comes in and updates it and makes sure everything's kosher. And then the code keeps moving down this manual process, rolls up all of our metrics, calculates all our calculated fields, appends it to all of our other data sources, our weekly snapshots. Dashboards are automatically updated. And then analyzation of these insights becomes very easy because the dashboards are interactive, they're already been built, they're automatically updated, you can look at them and iterate on them, especially in a tool like Tableau. And then insights also, you can program insights to be written automatically with some of the technology we have today. And you can present right there in that interactive dashboard without even having to put it in PowerPoint, or just download it from that dashboard into a PowerPoint format, and you're ready to go. So again, this process now becomes very streamlined, very easy, and you're able to save hours and hours a week. And oftentimes more than that. We've done pipelines where we've literally taken processes that took weeks down to seconds. And so there's oftentimes a huge lift in productivity you can have by automating your data processes. So how do you do it? Okay, so now that we've kind of seen before and after what that looks like, how do we actually go about doing this? So the first step, what we want to do is map out all of our steps, right? So you have to be detail oriented here. This is a step that could take some time. So you need to go through and say, who is taking the steps to process our data and what exactly are they doing every single step, what's the logic they're using, how are they thinking about it, what are the functions that they're using, and you need to map all that out in detail, because if you're going to automate it, you have to understand detail by detail exactly what's happening to that data. Incidentally, this is a good time as you're mapping that out, and actually, when people do this exercise, they finally get a view into what's happening with their data. Not only does that allow them to automate it, but it also allows them to audit it and say, well, maybe we shouldn't be applying this logic in this step. Maybe it should be something different. And so even just doing this step provides a level of visibility into your data processes that's often very helpful. Okay, so we've already gone through sort of what some of these steps look like, so I'm not gonna beleaguer that point. But once you have it all mapped out, like we just showed you, then we need to identify the manual steps in that map that can be automated. So in the file we just saw, all of those steps, with the exception of two, could be automating. This one right here, that's updating the manual key, that is manual, and then some of the analysis at the end is manual. Although, even though these are manual steps, the processes we can put in place can augment how we do those, and so the time is still reduced even though it's manual. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you identify the steps that you can automate? So, and how do you determine which ones you even want to automate? Because some steps are going to be harder to automate than others, and so you may say, hey, like we want to automate the easiest ones that take the most time, but the ones that are a little more tricky, we'll keep doing those manually. And that's okay. So in order to do this, you can fill out a spreadsheet, right? You can write all of these steps down. Let me show you what this might look like here. Okay, so we've taken that flow I just showed you, and we've written step by step what are we doing at each point, and then we've identified this is a data collection step, this is a data cleaning step. Right now, all these steps are manual. None of them are auditable. How often do we do this? That's important, because maybe if you only do something yearly, you don't need to automate it. If you're doing something weekly and it takes a lot of time, you should probably automate it. So again, this helps you have visibility into what action you should take here in your automation. So we've also mapped out, okay, well, how long do each of these steps take, right? Maybe it's like 5 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 15 minutes there. You'll notice none of these take a long time. This one is about half an hour. But when you add all of them up, that starts to be a sizable impact, especially if you're doing this week after week. Okay, so that's important. Understand how long each of these steps take. And then we also want to assess the risk involved with each of these manual steps, because if an error is made, what's the impact? And what is the likelihood of an error being made? And some of this you may have to guesstimate a little bit. But for example, if I'm applying some complicated logic to a data source, or if I'm trying to match up 3 different data sources and there's lots of files on my machine, that could get messy pretty quickly. I might be tired. It might be the end of the day. I might make a mistake, and then all the reporting down the chain is then going to be messed up. And then when someone's trying to make a decision on it, that's also going to be incorrect. So what's the impact of that, right? So if taking this step, for example, I say, 1 in 10 times, I might make a mistake there. Or 1 in 20 times, I might make a mistake there. And then especially if that's early in the process, and I make that mistake and I don't notice it and I keep going down the process, you're not going to see that error sometimes until you present the data. And then you're in a meeting with high-level people that have big salaries, so that meeting is expensive. And they're looking at the data and they notice something that is incongruous, and then that sparks this whole conversation about, well, is the data right and where is it wrong? And then the analysts have to go back to their process, and because it's not in code, they don't know where a mistake is, and so then trying to identify that mistake takes a lot of time, and once they find it, they have to redo the reporting, right? So these things tend to cascade a lot and take a lot of time. So even a small mistake here, even if it's at a low percentage early on, could end up costing a lot of time. And in fact, I think some of these estimates, like 2 hours for a mistake, again, could be very conservative. It could be a lot more if when you have that cascading effect, and maybe even worse if you don't notice there's an error and you're taking action on incorrect data. What's that going to do to your business, right? So these are all factors we think about when we're thinking about should we automate this and make sure it's accurate. Okay, so you have the time required. You also have the risk in doing it manually and what the impact there is, quantified in hours. And then you can calculate what the average cost is. And this is a template on our site. You can download this if you would like, along with those those flowcharts I just showed you to give you an example. If you want to go through this process, you can download that on our site. And then you say, okay, well, what technologies could we use to automate this? Okay, and I'll go through that step in just a second because right here we have Python and AWS, but there are other options. Okay, and then here we say, well, can it be totally automated? Some of them can be completely automated, sometimes mostly automated, but there's still going to be some manual intervention. So we want to call that out. And we want to call out if we do some automation intervention, what is the new time required to then complete that step as opposed to the old time. So in this instance, we just cut this time down by 10 minutes. Okay, and then you can do an ROI calculator, and then you figure out, well, okay, if we pull the trigger and we do this automation process, what does that look like? And so again, you can download this template. I'll let you do that and see what the mileage might be for your own organization. But for this process that we mapped out, if you average like $35 an hour for labor costs, which might be low based on salaries and compensation for analysts and people like that nowadays, this process would end up costing you $618 every single week. Every single month to run, right? And then when you add in the cost of errors, that calculation, then you end up being about $1,000 a month you're spending to get this done. Now, if you automate all that, that brings it down to $82 per month, right? So that's more than a 10x savings. So 1,200% savings, and you're saving about $900 every month. So that then starts to pay for itself very quickly when you do that kind of an automation. So that's an ROI calculator you can use to sort of look at and see if automation is worth it for your company. For your process, once you've mapped it all out and you've said, what could we automate, what could we not? Okay, and then what you can do is identify the appropriate technology or code that you want to use to automate this, right? And so there's a couple things you want to think about as you're thinking about doing this. Okay, so there's a couple different ways. Like you could go the full code route, or you could use some sort of tool like Tableau Prep or Alteryx are two ones that are pretty popular. Tableau Prep is newer, but it's gaining popularity. And typically a tool like Tableau Prep or Alteryx are going to be more expensive up front and in the long term. So you have to pay for licenses and you have to pay every single year as you're using those tools. So once you have the pipeline and the automation set up, you continue to pay for those tools year after year. Okay, but they're going to be easier, right? Because they're software, they're drag and drop, it's much easier to automate in those tools. And so you maybe don't have to pay for someone who knows how to do it in code, and you can get it done faster, but you will pay over time. Now, the other way you can do it is to go more towards the code way of doing it, which is more manual. It's more labor intensive up front, and people that are good enough to write data pipelines in code you're probably going to pay them more. So that typically has a little bit more front-loaded cost if you go that route. But then once the code is written and it's working, you don't really pay for it after that. Unless your data is huge, then you do have some payment that you have to make to your cloud provider for the data that you're processing. But typically those rates are very small. And oftentimes, again, if you're not working with massive data, it's very cheap, to the order of $50 or less, or maybe you're even on the free tier because you're not moving that much data. So you have to make a decision there whether you want to use a technology tool or you want to use code. Okay, and there may be different technology strategies you use for the different steps, right? So we said there's different steps in that flow. You have data collection steps, data cleaning steps, data processing steps, right? So a data collection step, you may want to use, code could be used for all of them, but if you're going with a tool, for example, data collection, two that you might look into is Fivetran or a Matillion. And this is by no means exhaustive, but I'm just giving you a flavor for the kinds of tools you could apply to these different steps if that's the route that you want to go. You can look up competitors of Matillion on Google if you want to see other companies that do that. But those are two you could use. For data cleaning, you have tools like Tableau Prep, Trifacta, Nime, Alteryx. Those you can also use through the processing and data movement steps. Once you get to data analysis, Nime and Alteryx are two that are pretty good there, so you'll notice you can use those throughout a lot of these steps. Data visualization, Tableau and Power BI are two great tools you can use there, amongst others. And data presentation, you can use QuickSight, you can use PowerPoint. A lot of these tools like Tableau, you can download things into PowerPoint or you can present in Tableau itself. So that's a flavor of the kinds of tools you might look into, or you could do it all in code. Python is a really popular coding language that does data pipelines really well, and you could automate that on a cloud platform like AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform, although AWS is a little more mature than Google, for example. Azure is a little more geared towards large enterprise, but all of them would work for what you're trying to do, probably. Okay, so once you have the technology done, you've thought through what technology do we want to use. Now we got to write up our plan, right? So we want to write up a plan here, and this is important because once you do this, you want a document that can be referenced, right? So you want to take and you want to say, all right, when we're going to automate this, maybe we want some people on a data governance committee. So all the stakeholders that will be looking at the reports, all of the people who will be working on the reports, all of the people who are in charge of keeping the data sources running and active and clean, those people should all be at the table, and they need to have a conversation about how the data gets used and where the data pulls from and who are the owners of the various data fields and pieces of the automation, who's going to make sure that it's running correctly a month or 2 months or 3 months down the line. And then you also want to make sure you have a standard language around the data. So a lot of times, especially if a process is built up over time, you'll find that a data field in one part of the company, they call it one thing, and in another part of the company, they call it something else, but they're saying the same thing. So you want to standardize the language that people are using around your data elements and your metrics so that everyone's on the same page, right? There's a lot of confusion that happens in companies when people are talking about the same things but using different words, or using the same words and talking about different things. So you have to standardize that. That's a whole process in and of itself that we could go into on another video. We do have 2 podcast episodes that are specifically about that topic if you want to look at those. This is one I interviewed Ryan Deeds, who's been doing this for years. He has really good insights on it. Here's another one, Fight the Good Fight Against Shadow IT. Simeon Schwartz is a consultant that's done this for years as well. So those are 2 good resources if you want to learn more about that and sort of changing the language and the culture around how you process data and think about data as an organization. But all of that should be thought about as you're writing up this automation plan. Okay, you want to, again, think through the flow, take this opportunity, and once you've mapped out that manual process, to change up how you're processing the data if you need to, or if there's a different flow that would benefit the business better, now's your opportunity to do that. Okay, technology touch points, right? So which step is going to be touched by which tools and which code and who are the owners, right? You have to map all that out. Human touch points, where does a human have to intervene in this process and who is that going to be? Who is the owner? And then again, this provides a level of transparency so everyone can trust the data. And if people move on, roles are always changing, people are moving companies. This document then provides the means by which someone enters the organization, they can have a look at it and see exactly what's happening. Or if you need to switch roles and someone needs to take over a process for somebody, they know exactly what they need to do, and always, you're on the same page. So that document is a really important piece of an automation plan that's not going to blow up. Okay, step 5. So once you've done that, you actually then build out the automation according to your plan. And as you're doing this, you may run into some snags. There's always things that you can't foresee, and so if you do that, just make sure you're running against the document. You have a project manager that's watching this and iterating on it. And if there are changes that need to be made, you can make the changes to the document according to what you are actually building. So both are in sync. Okay, and if there's a major change, you may want approvals again from that data governance committee to make sure everything is okay. Okay, and then once you've done that, then the next step is you want to set up alerts to monitor this new automated process you have, right? So now that this is going to be running in code, you want to make sure it's running accurately. And so not only in terms of, if some job fails, or there's a data element that comes through the process that's incorrect and it breaks the flow, someone needs to know about that. So the system should be set up to send an alert to the owner so that they know the system failed, the production of the reports failed, where did it fail. Make sure that you are descriptive with those error messages so someone can go in and troubleshoot and fix it. There's nothing worse than like an error message that's totally random and you don't know what it means and it's very ambiguous, because that then takes time to fix. So make sure you're really tight on those messages. And not only in terms of the process failing, but also in terms of the actual data processing itself. So you may want to put some statistical controls, for example, on that flow. So if you're producing values that you wouldn't expect, like usually maybe the value lies between 1 and 10 that's produced from a certain step, and all of a sudden it's producing values that are, in the thousands, that's probably an error. So putting some statistical controls on there, on that process flow, to say, hey, like if we see a value that's way outside the range that we expect, we want to look at that and make sure this thing's still running accurately. Okay, and then that'll ensure you can always trust your pipeline, it's running, and it's producing what you think it's producing. Okay, and then once that's done, you can do your final ROI analysis based on, again, the sheet I showed you. And you can also document how much did it cost to produce that pipeline, and then sort of see how many months will it take to recoup that cost, and then what's our savings going forward, to know if you have positive ROI and how much. And then once you've done that, you're good to go. So monitor it going forward. Make sure that document is where people can find it, and you want also to have someone that is the owner of that document. So again, if roles change or someone leaves the company, or that document needs to be tweaked, or the process needs to be tweaked, someone is in charge of keeping that document up to date and ensuring everything runs well, and make sure that they're checked for that. So again, hopefully those steps are helpful in thinking through all of the variables and things you need to do to get this pipeline done. We do this for companies all the time. We've been doing this for years. If you would like help in going through all those steps, making sure you get it right, getting it done quickly and accurately, selecting the right technology that you want, and making sure that your pipeline is doing what you want it to do, and finding positive ROI for your company, certainly you can reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you and even just let you know, what would something like this cost? How difficult would it be? Then you can, go ahead and do it yourself, or hire us and we can help you do it. So hopefully that has been helpful. If you have questions or comments, reach out to us, let us know, and just wish you guys success in automating your data pipelines.